All right, joining us now to discuss, Congressman Jay Obernolte, representing California's 8th District, a member of the House Budget Committee. He's leading the charge against the reconciliation vote. He and over 200 of his colleagues sent a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, calling for the vote to be postponed until the CBO can issue a full score and fiscal analysis of the bill. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. How in the world have we gone from a world where we say, wait, we have to read the bill before we vote for it, to saying that we have to vote for it before we can actually read the bill, to now we can just pass bills without actually knowing what the final price tag will be?
You are absolutely right about that. And in fact, our rules require us to have the Congressional Budget Office score these bills before Congress votes on them. The Congressional Budget Act of 1974 requires the CBO to score the bills. House Rule 13, our own rules in the House of Representatives, requires us to have that score before we schedule a vote on a reconciliation bill. And that's why last week I led a group of over 200 members of the House of Representatives in demanding that Speaker Pelosi wait to vote on the bill until that score was available. The message we were sending is, Mr. President, Madam Speaker, if you say that the reconciliation bill will not add a single dollar to the federal deficit, then prove it. Prove it by waiting for the CBO to score the bill before lawmakers are asked to vote on it.
Well, to that point, what is one to do when the people walking the halls of Congress do not even abide by their own laws and rules? Is there any methodology in place that can discontinue this from happening in the future, or perhaps will it have any impact on the final passage of this bill into law?
Well, it's an excellent point that you make. The House of Representatives, unlike the Senate, is a majoritarian institution. So whoever has the majority, even if it's only by a single vote, they get to make the rules. And so unfortunately, it sets a terrible example for the American people when we tell everyone they ought to follow the rules. And yet we say, we have rules in the House. We follow the rules. We respect the rules, except when we decide to waive the rules, in which case apparently there are no rules. However, it has to be said that the CBO is going to score this bill eventually, and we think we know what they're going to find. The Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania last Friday issued their analysis of the bill, and their analysis shows that the bill will add at least $300 billion to the national debt, and that's if all the programs sunset on time, which, as we know, is usually not the case in Congress. If the programs don't sunset, it's going to add over $2.5 trillion to the national debt. That is a stunning number. So eventually the CBO is going to come back with a score on this bill, and then we're going to see what it really costs. And you have to admit, too, that the bill goes over to the Senate. Should it pass the House, it's going to have its own problems in the Senate. Certainly it's going to be modified in the Senate because it's going to have to go through the birdbath process where the inappropriate provisions are stripped out. And when it comes back to the Senate, it will be voted on again. So we're going to have financial information on this bill before it's voted on, but it's unconscionable that we would even consider voting on the largest spending bill in the history of the United States without knowing the cost of the bill.
I mean, it's truly remarkable. You mentioned that Wharton study, which says that the true price tag on that could be anywhere around $3 or $4 trillion. It appears as if, as always, the word temporary, just a synonym for permanent in the halls of power down in D.C. I wanted to get your reaction to President Biden's victory lap this weekend and the comments he made about everyday Americans. Take a listen.
If we were all going out and having lunch together and I said, let's ask whoever's in the next table, no matter what restaurant we're in, have them explain the supply chain to us. Think they'd understand what we're talking about? They're smart people, but supply chain.
So I don't know how many different ways this administration can find to insult the American people. First, they said, the vice president said that people living in rural America were rubes who couldn't find a copy machine. Now he's saying that people don't, they said that inflation was a high-class issue. Now they're saying that people can't understand supply chains. I'm no expert here on certain matters, but I think the average person understands that if their dollars buy less today than they did yesterday, that's inflation. person, and that is bad. I think the average person understands that if there are no diapers on the shelves and there are babies crying in the car, that is bad. Seems to me that they don't seem to have any appreciation or respect for the actual everyday realities of Americans struggling to get by in the aftermath of the lockdowns they put in place.
Yes, I completely agree. And, to answer the president's question, what does the American public understand? This is what my constituents understand. They understand that today it costs them over $20 more to fill their gas tank in their car just to go to work than it did a year ago before President Biden took office. That's real. That's $20 out of their pocket. They understand that buying meat at the grocery store costs 14% more today than it did a year ago. They understand that the price of bread's higher, the price of bacon's higher. And this is having a real impact on the lives of everyday Americans, the people that the president are talking about. And wage gains have not kept up with them. The real wage, the living wage of the American public is lower now than it was a year ago. And I think that this spells real trouble for the administration. I think that they're taking exactly the wrong message away from what happened in Virginia and New Jersey last week. The message that they're hearing is that they're not being progressive enough, but the real message is that the American public has had it with this rampant inflation. And unfortunately, the reconciliation bill that's being considered is just going to make things worse, because any economist will tell you deficit government spending is dangerously inflationary. And I hope that sooner or later the administration gets that message.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, we saw, switching gears a little bit, how we went from energy independence to energy dependence in just 10 short months under this Biden administration. They shut down the Keystone pipeline while they greenlit a pipeline that went from Russia to Germany carrying the dirtiest natural gas. They don't seem to care. It seems their new objective is not just dependence, but reliance. They're considering setting down another pipeline, the Line 5 oil pipeline that links Superior, Wisconsin with Sarnia, Ontario. Gas prices already surging heading into the winter months. We've got Energy Secretary Granholm basically cackling about how these skyrocketing costs are underway. What are your thoughts here? Because at the heart of this are Americans paying $400 million additional per day, year over last, on fuel because of these decisions being made down at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yes, and I think the administration needs to consider the effect that this is going to have on not just the American public, but in particular on the poor and the working poor. And if you want an example of how that can go awry, just look at California. The district that I represent in California, we pay about twice as much in residential electric rates than our neighbors in Arizona and Nevada. We pay 3 times as much in commercial electric rates. We pay 4 times as much in industrial electric rates. And that is why California has the highest poverty and the highest homelessness of any state in the country. So, I mean, that's an illustration of the disastrous effects that these kind of energy policies can have on the working poor and the people that are impoverished. And it's just going to get worse. As you say, the more that we restrict the energy supply, the higher the price of energy will go. And that might be good from the Democrats' point of view, because maybe they're saving the planet, but it's very bad for the people that they say they're supposed to sympathize with, those people who are in poverty. And one more thing that I think that we should be talking about more is the fact that we here in the United States produce energy more cleanly than any country in the world, just because of the stringent regulations that are here. The more that we shut down our domestic energy industry, the more reliant we become on foreign energy. The worse it is for the planet, because the carbon emissions from producing that energy just go up. So we should be encouraging energy to be produced here, not importing it from other countries.
Absolutely. Quickly want to turn our lonely eyes to your home state, California. Some of the strictest mandates in the country as it relates to COVID, and yet certainly having much higher cases of COVID than states like Texas or Florida. Protests growing against the mandates. In Los Angeles today, firefighters and workers are marching for freedom. Why does the left continue to push for these policies when the science they tell us to trust seems to suggest that the mandates are not having the intended outcome, specifically as it relates certainly to the masks alone?
Well, I think that it fits right into their worldview. And this is a graphic illustration of the difference between conservative thinking and progressive thinking. The progressives really feel like it's the government's responsibility to tell you how to live your life. And that's what they think about the vaccine. And to be clear, I am pro-vaccine, but I am very anti-mandate. I am terrified, and that's not overstating. I'm terrified of the effect that these mandates are going to have on our workforces. And you're going to see it in our military readiness, because we're going to lose a lot of members of the military that quite reasonably say, no one's going to tell me what I should be putting in my body. I worry about our wildfire preparedness, because a lot of our firefighters are going to refuse the vaccine. I worry about our law enforcement, because many of those individuals are going to refuse the vaccine. And we've already seen this play out in the healthcare industry, where we've got millions of nurses and doctors walking off the job. So this is going to come to a head. But to answer your question, that's the reason why the progressives feel like they're right here, is because they think that
Right.
their worldview justifies telling the rest of society what to do.
Absolutely. The thing about those dangerous precedents, once they're set, they impact us all. Congressman Obernolte, thank you so much. As always, God bless you. We'll talk to you again soon.
Always good to see you, Joe.